So I would suggest go straight on. I welcome you very much, together with my co-moderators Leen and John, to do this first plenary session about topics which are not so common. We generally don't talk about these topics during our conferences because we are very much into technique generally. But I think, and I have done ECMO now more than 20 years, apart from importance of technique, I think it is very much about caring. Caring for patients, of course, first of all, but then also caring for ourselves, caring for our staff, caring for our nurses, even sometimes caring for a perfusionist, because they are technicians, but they need some care as well. Isn't that right, Leen? But on top of that, yeah, we also have to care about other things like our surroundings, like nature, like the next generation. And as medical staff, we often do not consider things which are important for the future. So it is my pleasure now to introduce Peter to you. Peter Roeleveld from Leiden. He's the director of the PICO ICU. And Pete, you will introduce us a little bit towards sustainability and ECMO. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. I feel a little bit uncomfortable speaking about this subject. We'll be a little bit provocative as well. So starting an ECMO conference with this, I think is very confronting. About a year ago, I'm part of the steering committee. I suggested that we need to start looking into sustainability as a ELSO community. And nobody put their hands up, so they made me the chair of the sustainability working group. And I know nothing about sustainability. My colleagues in my unit sort of laughed. You, sustainable, you're the worst, because I'm an ECMO enthusiast. I love ELSO. I speak around the entire globe. I travel a lot. So I'm very, very guilty of many things that I'm now about to go up against. And I've learned a lot in the last 6 months after having set up this sustainable working group. And I'd like to share a little bit with you and take you along on that journey, because we are in trouble. We are in trouble. These are the Sustainable Development Goals by the World Health Organization. I suggest all that you probably all know them, but we're going to focus on climate action. And the goal is to keep the Earth from warming up. And we're failing at that. We're going fast and backward fast. About 175 years ago, the first people started to think maybe greenhouse gases will do something bad for the planet. 50 years ago, Henry Kissinger already said that climatic changes throughout the world will affect us all. 36 years ago, we said emissions must drop by 20% in 2005. Then the first COP conference on energy happened 27 years ago. We have to stop with our emissions. 10 years ago, we said, we have to stop, we have to do anything, we have to do something, and nothing happens. I was ignorant. I thought that we were actually decreasing our usage of coal and fossil fuels, but we're not. They're only increasing. So we're getting worse and worse. So the country and the world is warming up. So what are we talking about? Some figures. So if we look at all the greenhouse gases that are produced in the world, there is about 50 billion tons of CO2 and other greenhouse gases being produced around the world. And that makes for an increasingly higher temperature. And if we compare to the pre-industrial era, before we started with our machinery, we've already breached the 2 degrees increase in the world. If we look at the 30 warmest days recorded in history, 21 of those 30 days are in 2023. We're increasingly warming up. And I think it's snowballing, we're spiraling. Ice is vanishing, and we're looking at 30 million tons of ice being lost in Greenland per hour. These are staggering numbers. It's only in Switzerland, over the last 2 years, 10% loss of their glaciers. And no wonder that there are people standing up against this. In Switzerland, 2-3 weeks ago, I think, the Swiss grannies, 2,000 ladies, won a court case at the Court for Human Rights, saying that the Swiss government hasn't done enough to keep the climate from changing, and that's affecting their health and their children's health and their grandchildren's health. And they won this case. So things are going to change. They're going to have to change. We see frequent weather and extreme weather changes more and more often. We see rising seas because of this loss. Last year in January, people were playing on the beach in Spain during Christmas time. It was 25 degrees, lovely weather, beautiful, but it used to be 10 degrees. This is not a temperature rise, or an average temperature rise of 2 or 1.5%. This is 15 degrees hotter than normal. And this is not just one day, this is throughout January. And on the other, so what you see is that skiing holidays are being, we're not going to be able to do that in a few years anymore. Things are drying up. This is the heat map. It's impressively warm throughout the world. And what you see is that on one side of the world, you see that things are flooding, there's too much water. On the other hand, it's burning. On the background, you see Dubai airport last week. Floods, rain, we have strange weather. And it's increasingly getting stranger. And not only does it affect the temperature and our health, it also it costs staggering amounts of money. Because by the loss of good crops and fields, this will affect our economy as well. And this is really, really important. The amount of money that's involved is just immense. So if this keeps going on, and some people will say that in the next 4 to 14 years, we'll have such a drought, such a loss of crops, that we will run into huge, huge problems and huge economic crisis. And then we're not at 2 degrees temperature rise yet, but we are in deep trouble. So this talk is more of like a wake-up call and a call to action, not just for yourself, but mainly for myself. And I hope to take you with me. So what you see is that in the literature in PubMed, increasingly, luckily, people are starting to pay attention to this, because we have an obligation, like you just said, thank you. We have an obligation to our patients, but we also have an obligation to society as a whole and to our planet. And many years ago, in 1993, The Lancet already started writing about climate change. It's taking a long time for us to realize what's going on. And some of us have, and some good initiatives have been done, but this is a problem. So what are we looking at? Some of the numbers. So the health sector, so we, you and me, as a whole, we're responsible for about 5% of all greenhouse gas emissions across the world. No, it doesn't mean anything, 5%, doesn't sound so much, does it? But if we were a country, if the health services around the globe were a country, we would be the 5th country in the world, just before Japan. Now imagine all the greenhouse gases being produced in Japan, as an example. That might give you some indication as to what we're talking about. So if we can affect that, if we can reduce, as a health service, can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, I think that would be very helpful. Personally, we produce about 8.8 gigatons of greenhouse gases per year. We need to go down to 2 tons. I looked at my own greenhouse gas emissions. You can go to the World, the WWF website and calculate roughly what your greenhouse gas emissions are. And I'm guilty. And I ride my bike to work. I have an electric vehicle. I use green energy. But my goal of my production of CO2 was over 20 tons per year, where the average in the UK is 8.8 tons for a person. So again, I'm guilty. But if I take away my EuroELSO flights, I'm in the clear again. Still a lot more than 2 tons that were expected. So a lot of my footprint on the Earth is because of travel. But not only travel. If I compare my flight from Amsterdam to Krakow I produce just as much of CO2 equivalent gases as an adult with sepsis in ICU per day. So an adult in intensive care creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Our patients create a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And most of those are because of the energy that we use to clean the rooms, to warm the room, or cool down the room, or circulate the air. So a lot of it is because of, I don't know, it doesn't point, does it? No. Well, on the green on the left, and on the electricity that we use. But did you know that a meter dose inhaler, if you have one dose inhaler you prescribe to your patient of albuterol, if he or she uses that, the amount of greenhouse gases that evaporate are similar to a 200-kilometer drive in a mid-sized vehicle car. So if we switch that to nebulization or use an emission chamber or anything, we need to think about those small things. But I need to focus on ECMO. Europe has said we need to go green. So in Europe there's legislation that will make sure that every hospital in Europe needs to report their environmental, their social, and their governance towards sustainability by 2026. You need to have those numbers available at your hospital. What do you use? How much greenhouse gases do you emit? What are your plans of dealing with those? So we will have to do that. And not only us, but also the companies. So this is in general. What about ECMO? Well, I think ECMO is just the tip of the iceberg in ICU. So we're looking mainly at what happens in ICU and what can we as ECMologists do. I urge you to read these few papers. Reducing the climate impact of critical care gives some very good examples of simple things that you can do to reduce the carbon footprint of your unit, your patient. I think one of the most important things is, and that relates to us in ECMO, is stop overtreatment. About 30% of the care that we provide in ICU is low-value care, meaning that there's a lot of effort put into something that doesn't create a benefit for the patient. If we can identify that 30%, that would be very, very helpful. The main thing that we need to do is think and rethink. Is what we're doing good for the patient? Is it good for the environment? What can we do to reduce whatever that we're giving? Can we reduce the amount of PPE, the gowns that we're using, the gloves that we're using? Can we turn down the air conditioning overnight? Can we turn down the recirculation in the isolation rooms? Think and keep thinking every day. Can I prolong the use of the central lines? Think and reduce whatever that is that you're using. Then you can reuse, and recycling has a very small benefit. So we all feel very good about recycling. I thought, oh, we recycle everything, so I'm okay. No, it's only a very small part of what we can do with that. If you really want tips, ANZIC, so the Australian and New Zealand Intensive Care Foundation, have put out a beginner's guide to sustainability in the ICU. I urge you all to read this and share it with your policymakers, share it with your staff, and read about it. And this is, I think, the main thing that you should, and it's very, very helpful. But what about ECMO? And here's where I'm going to be a little bit controversial. I think ECMO is the tip of the iceberg in ICU care. And I think that about 50%, depending on the patient, 50% will survive, 50% will not, depending on the indication. If we can think of ways of reducing the use of ECMO and getting appropriate selection, that's something that we do for our patients. It's better for them. It's better for the environment. It's better for the purse. It's cheaper. So think about all the ICU admissions. We should try and limit ECMO use and ECMO duration. Think about things like age and when do you offer ECMO? Do you offer it to very old people? Should we really be talking about artificial placentas? How much does that create? What does it happen? What does it do to our environment? This is something that we really want. We all are pushing the boundaries. That is our goal. I love ECMO. I love developing things. I love making it better for the specific patient in front of me. But as a whole, for the environment, for a society, we need to really start thinking about what we're doing and maybe at some point setting the boundary. Like, do we really want helicopters to fly to small children with arrest out of hospital? So, specific to ECMO, we need to limit low-value care. And we can do that by limiting blood tests, systematic blood cultures, limit the use of PPE, prolong the use of central lines, prolong storage of your primed circuits, reduce contents of the procedure packs, change a component of the ECMO, not the entire ECMO circuit, limit procedures and interventions, use reusable drapes and gowns, limit the routine use of CRRT, and then there's many other. Make sure your hospital goes to green energy. Change the bank. Go to a bank that doesn't invest into fossil fuels. Turn down the heating. Buy less. Cut. There's so much you can do, and too much for me to get into. But for our ECMO, I think being at the tip of the iceberg, we really need to think about our limits. And for EuroELSO as a society, we're aiming to go for a carbon-neutral conference. Travel by train, plant a tree, recycle. We can think about online conferences, but then we can't go dancing, Leen. I know you like dancing. We miss the human interaction. It's very expensive. So there's downsides to that as well, because as a community we need to be together. But we're thinking about these things. You can talk to the producers of all the ECMO machines if they have declared their sustainability rules and engagement and thoughts and plans. And the ones with the yellow stars have a sustainability program on their website. So think about that sustainability is not just about the environment, it's also better for the patient. And we should combine these efforts. Best care for your patient, best care for the environment and the society as a whole, reduce costs, and in that way we can go further. So to finish off, we need to rethink, reduce, reuse, and recycle. We need to really step up because we're snowballing backwards here. We need to limit the use of ECMO, which I know is a very controversial thing to say at an ECMO conference. The duration of ECMO, and would love to invite you to join our working group. And these are the 3 landmark papers that I think that are helpful to everybody. So with that, I thank you, and I'll go and hide.
Yes, thank you, Peter. It took me some time before I really could figure out what you were going to say about sustainability in ECMO, but you made some very good points. Anyway, probably there's some questions from the audience, but we will take the questions at the end of this session when we'll invite all the speakers back. So for our next speaker, I'm really very honored, or we are very honored to invite Professor Steinseifer. Thank you, Thomas. He's an engineer, you know, and EuroELSO we have a very close cooperation, very healthy cooperation with our engineers. We really value their input. We need their input. And yes, we look forward to your talk to how we can alleviate the burden of the medical device regulations.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's definitely a pleasure to be standing here, but after such a talk, then now go into medical device regulation, into, as Jutta said, just boring stuff about getting devices to market. But I will try to go through with that. The topic was how notified bodies should alleviate the burden of the medical device regulation. I have a disclosure, and because I'm not a notified body, I'm an academic, so I have to talk on behalf of the notified bodies here, but I'm not one. But I'm a shareholder of AC Biomed, a company that provides approval testing for medical devices. That means we, of course, have some contacts to manufacturers and also to notified bodies. Now, if we look at the typical medical device development process, and this is a chart as an example from Stanford University, where you have on the left-hand side the different functional areas like clinical, marketing, etc. And you go through different phases from phase 1 to 5 in that case, and every time you have reached a goal in your phase, you go to the next phase. That's why we call it a stage gate or phase process. I don't want to go in detail here, just want to point out, if you look at the different activities that have to be done, you see that almost half of all the activities and decisions in a medical device development process are affected by regulatory requirements. So that means that is a big burden, and we are talking about a burden here. And as you all know, the medical devices are classified according to their invasiveness, according to their duration of application. We have passive or active implants. And of course, the higher the classification or the higher the class a medical product is in, the higher is also the regulatory burden. Now, if we go back to our chart, we are at some time in phase 4, maybe we are at the point where we want to go for regulatory approval. We have different possibilities. We can go to the US, or we can go to Europe or other places. In Europe, of course, we had always a very straightforward process, which was dominated by the medical device directives. As you see here, they affected this approval process. And this has, or the medical device directives covered all the regular devices. We also had the active implantable medical device directives, the AIMDD. And also we had the ones about in vitro diagnostics. Now this is all closed since May 2021. Europe has changed ever since. If we look at it, the medical device directives were put together with the active implantable medical devices to the medical device regulations in effective 2021. It was published in 2017, but there was a transition phase. And we also have still separate the in vitro diagnostic devices. It's important to understand what's the difference between a directive and a regulation. A directive is, it lays down, as it says here, certain results that must be achieved, but each member state is free to decide how to transpose directives into national laws. So that was that every member state so far had their own way to deal with the directives. Whereas a regulation now is a binding legal force throughout every member state. That means now it's more or less a law for the entire European Union, and the member states cannot do what they want anymore. So what has changed, of course, also, we're trying always to reduce bureaucratism, but we always go the other way around. So we have now 352 pages, something like that, 10 chapters, 17 annexes, much more than we had before. And if we look at it, if you look from 2017 on, that was the original publication of the MDR. In the meantime, we had some corrections and we had amendments and all kinds. So all the time, these regulations change. It's a little bit, as I always call it, it's shooting on a moving target because it's changing all the time. And we get back to that a little later. You can look at, if you're interested, you can go online and look at all the documents that you find on the lower left corner. You find all the actual corrections and all the amendments, etc. Now, what are the key changes? There are a lot of changes, of course, but what are the key changes? You see product scope expansion. Some products have now, are now called medical devices or included in this medical device regulations that were not medical devices before. And also you have unique device identification. You have to, also some of the devices are reclassified. For example, software was before most of the time just a class 1 device, now it's 2A. So they are most of the time, if you say it, upgraded means they go higher in the class, seldom down in the class. I would like to point out 2-3 things. For example, one is no grandfathering provisions, because this is very important to understand what happened here. We had basically all medical devices have now a certificate for maximum 5 years, and all the old or legacy devices had to be reclassified. That means devices that you had been working with, for example, heart valves. I remember St. Jude heart valve since 1977 on the market, million times implanted, needs to be suddenly recertified. And that means if we look at it, and that has to be done, by the way, until May 25, 2024. If you look at the date, it's just in 1 month. That would have been done. So we had so far, as of October 2023, we had about 2,000 certificates were issued, and maximum was calculated that we have another 7,000 until May. But there were about 23,000 medical devices that still had to be recertified. And that is something impossible almost in 1 year or until May 25, 2024. We had also in former times 80, 90 notified bodies. We have now 39 notified bodies as of October 23. I double-checked it, it's now 45 notified bodies. That means we have an enormous shortage of resources in order to recertify these devices, and that means we ran almost into the situation that we didn't have any devices anymore, or not very many devices, in Europe anymore. This is crucial. And so what happened is, finally, the European Union found out that there is a problem. Maybe they were told that there is a problem, but by many of the users and the manufacturers. And so they decided on a so-called transitional provision in March 2023 and gave an extension for most of the devices, and that goes, as you see here on the timeline, until December 2028. So this is now, at the moment, the problem is a little bit reduced, although it's still a lot to do to certify 23,000 devices, plus the new ones that are coming out. So let's go to another point of these key changes, and this is affecting clinical evidence. Well, there is, the MDR now requires much more rigorous clinical evidence for class 3 and implantable medical devices, and also for class 2 and 2B devices, for example, oxygenators. There is a possibility, if you want to draw up your clinical evaluation plan for that, there is a possibility that's put up in the MDR in Article 61 that you can ask for a voluntary consultation, which should be available by expert panels. These expert panels are put together by the EMA, by the European Medicines Agency, and so there is a possibility to get some help there. Another one is the rigorous post-market oversight, and I think this is one of the most important changes, because now you have to do annual post-market clinical follow-up reports and also periodic safety update reports. It means a lot of reporting once you're on the market. That means with your approval, it's not done. All this regulatory stuff goes on. And it's a little bit redundant, and there are some discussions at the moment at the EU, because you have to recertify your product, means to do a new approval basically every 5 years. In the same moment, you have to report every year. So it's a lot of work that is probably redundant. Now, there are possibilities if you want to understand what MDR means or what you have to do. There is a medical device coordination group in the EU that puts up guidance. Guidance means they should tell you what is expected from you, what you should do, or how you could interpret the medical device regulations. And this is on the homepage also. There are about 120 documents. There are about more than 1,000 pages that you can go through if you want to learn all that, and there is more to come. Again, this is about bureaucracy. Now, I have seen on the internet an interesting summary from an innovation summit in Dublin, which took place about 2 weeks ago. I think it was on 16th of April something. In a panel discussion, MDR, time for real change, stop kicking the can. And I put up this summary here, and there are basically 2 points which are pointing now also to the question with the notified bodies. And one is, while the initial issue was the resources of the notified bodies, because we didn't have enough, they didn't have enough people, the capacity is now there, but they are spending 80% of their time on documentation, formatting of documentation, creating reports that aren't adding value to the original goals of supporting innovation and ensuring patient safety. This is something to think about. 80% dead work. And also with the guidance, I mentioned it before, more than 1,000 pages. Guidance is good, but companies are getting thousands of pages of guidance that muddies rather than clarifies the water. So this is also an interesting point. Now, let's get to the points, 2 points. What can the manufacturers do to alleviate the MDR burden? And then I get to the notified bodies. Manufacturers, of course, have to do a very proper planning. That means that they start planning for the quality management, clinical evidence, etc., early and often. They have to do the documentation properly. They have to develop technical documentation in the manner regulators want to see, clear, organized, readily searchable, and unambiguous. the notified body dialogue is very important, that they contact early with the notified body and not only contact, also contract early with the notified body and start a dialogue as early in the development as possible. It's very important, and this is something underestimated, to get the right notified body. Because not every notified body may do every product. So you have to make sure that the notified body you talk to has your product also in its scope. This is something why, I read an article why 48% of approval applications were put down because the manufacturer didn't contact the right notified body. So you have to be very careful that you select the right notified body. Expert panel consultation. I mentioned that there are the expert panels for your clinical trials, because this is very important that you get some feedback there, because the clinical trials are a little bit all over the place and very difficult to get a good point. And then coordinate efforts, transparency and contribution to standardization, harmonization documents. And I'm very happy and thankful to Jutta, I don't know whether she's still in the room, because she also mentioned that the manufacturers should also participate in the standardization process in order to make it easy. Also, these standards, like ISO standards, they can be harmonized with MDR. If they are harmonized with MDR, that means they are accepted by MDR, it will ease the process pretty much. And it's in the interest of the manufacturers to really participate in this process. Last but not least, the main question that came up, or that I was asked for this presentation, how notified bodies should alleviate the burden of the medical device regulation. First of all, they could streamline their process. If you look, currently it takes about 18 to 24 months to get a class 2 device approved, like an oxygenator. It takes that time. In the FDA, for the FDA in the US, it takes about 6 months. And in former times, it also took about 6 months in Europe. And it costed maybe 60, 70, 80,000, maybe some 10,000 euro to do that. In the meantime, it takes 18 to 24 months, and it costs, it's open more or less, the cost up to 500,000 easily, or something like that. And that has also a little bit to do with the streamlining of the process of the notified bodies. They should ensure transparency. They should provide clear time and cost estimates. Every manufacturer knows it. You go to the notified body, you say, this is what I want to do, but you don't get a clear answer how long it would take and how much it would cost, and at the end you have to pay 500,000. So this is also something that should be streamlined and have more transparency. Ensure consistency between and within even organizations. That they educate and train their specialists to common standards means you can go even within one organization. If you get a certain reviewer he tells you, yeah, that's fine what you did, all wonderful, your product is approved. You go to the next one in the same organization, you say, oh, there are things missing, you have to do this and this and this again. So they have to get common standards, not only from notified body 1 to 2, but also within their organizations. They should offer structured dialogues. Many notified bodies may not consult, but they can offer structured dialogues. You can go there and say, I want to do this, is this okay? They can say yes or no. That's not a consulting. This is a dialogue that they can do. The FDA does that wonderfully because they have the so-called Q submission program. You can request a feedback in writing or in a meeting. You tell them, this is what I want to do, and then they tell you, yes, you can do it this way, or you have to do it different. So this should be also possible, and it's even also according to MDCG, to this medical device coordination group, they even have that in their guidelines that they should do that. They should simplify submissions. They should use one common format instead of lots of individual formats. If you go to notified body A, they're using totally different formats than notified body B. It's always different. Everybody does it differently. So they should probably stick their heads together and get more joint format. We see that in the FDA. Of course, it's easier. FDA is just one organization. We have 45 in the moment. The FDA has a so-called E-Star program for electronic submission. You can submit your data there. Takes 10 minutes and you get your receipt. So you have your confirmation. Very easy, very straightforward. We should have something like that also. And last but not least, use a little bit more common sense instead of formalism. And with saying that, I would like to make a very important point, because there may be notified bodies in the room. It's very difficult. So this shouldn't be a notified body bashing. This is just saying what could be done in order to improve the situation. It's very difficult. I said it before, it's shooting on moving targets. MDR is changing, nobody really knows how to deal with it, and the notified bodies are at the back end there, more or less. They have to certify it, and they have to have a lot of people, many new resources. They had to hire lots of people, and all these people are coming new into the field. You have to find a specialist for that. So it's a very, very difficult task. They're doing a good job. It's just maybe some points that could be improved. And with that, I'm finished, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. The bureaucracy of healthcare. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Salman Aziz. He's an intensive care and cardiovascular critical lead in Abu Dhabi, and he's going to take us through another interesting area of healthcare, how to negotiate with healthcare insurances. Any of us who've tried to insure anything in the last few years will be interested in this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Jonathan, for your introduction. And I'd like to thank the scientific committee and the leadership of the EuroELSO for inviting me for this prestigious conference. Negotiating healthcare insurance is one of the difficult subjects as well, because literature is probably limited, as per my research. And I spend a lot of time negotiating with the insurance companies how to build up perfect ECMO insurance coverage. I have no disclosures, and my learning objectives is just to brief about the ECMO program in Abu Dhabi, in addition to identifying the financial challenges that we faced during our evaluation, recent literature about the ECMO cost and charges, and what we have done so far there. Historically, in Abu Dhabi, the ECMO program was founded by Dr. Malaika Mendonca. She is probably here. And generation to generation, the work had continued. And so far, we are having centers of excellence who are taking care of neonatal, pediatric, and also adult ECMO programs with a bridge to organ transplantation. Here's the map of United Arab Emirates, and you can see the Abu Dhabi is constituting 87% of the geography of United Arab Emirates, with a population of 1.5 living in the capital. And you can see that the Department of Health, the main regulatory body taking care of all the logistics happening about the healthcare system in the capital. So for having a well-established ECMO ecosystem, the Undersecretary Office of Department of Health in Abu Dhabi had issued a circular to establish an elite task force to take care of all the logistics related to the ECMO practice in Abu Dhabi. And you can see that many responsibilities were assigned, and also one of them is the insurance coverage and the financial issues related to the ECMO. And you can see that the Center of Emergency Preparedness and Response in Abu Dhabi was taking care of all these broad list of emergencies that can be encountered over there. One of them is the ECMO. So you can see that the financial cost and the charges related to the these emergencies for those patients is huge. And the insurance system, yes, is evolving, but not yet fully mature there. And the ECMO framework that is proposed to be covering the whole pathway for the ECMO consultation, starting from the pre-hospital, then to the hospital, and calling the ECMO teams to to fix the ECMO for these patients and then taking them for the ECMO centers and tertiary care centers. And then after that, after recovery is the rehabilitation phase. So you can see this whole chain is, made of a lot of work, but the insurance system is not well established to cover for this process. And all this process is going to be moderated by the Unified Medical Operation Command Center, which is going to operate in May, June 2024, hopefully. And as you know, the ECMO service is hyper intense and is more expensive than compared to the usual or conventional critical care, in addition to the length of stay, which is the main contributor for the cost of the ECMO patients. Besides that, the cost of the ECMO equipment and pharmaceuticals, the cost of the ECMO consultations and retrieval process, and also the ECMO ICU patient care, and the cost of the rehabilitation, which we has also not to ignore because we are measuring our 30 days and 60 days survival post-discharge from the hospital. And after all this review, we look to how is the insurance system. And first thing, we discovered that the insurance policy for the ECMO was written in 2012 by cardiac surgeon, and it was just only covering for ECMO cases that are difficult to wean from bypass machine. And for that reason, it was not really mature to enough. It was covering the ECMO equipment and pharmaceuticals beside the ICU care. However, that is not including consultations and the retrieval process and the cost of rehabilitation. We also found out that the insurance policy has not been updated since 2012, and the CPD codes were not updated. And more interestingly, that the insurance policy that time until now is just covering for one ECMO circuit only during the whole run. And you can see that the CPD codes were just only 3 are active according to the payers, and nothing was related to the ECMO weaning. More interestingly and more painful is the calculated financial loss for prolonged ECMO runs were calculated between 50,000 euros and 500,000 euros per case who are going to have long runs or bridge to transplantation. So in Abu Dhabi, we are demanded to go more with the ECMO cases to save more lives, but the hospitals are losing money because of the reimbursement process is not optimum. So also we found out that the ECMO financial coverage was capped, and the ECMO considered by the insurance policymakers as a routine mechanical ventilation and tracheostomy care. Also, we found out that the ECMO does not make revenue in United Arab Emirates. Moreover, the ECMO service is really complex and requires a lot of training, staffing, equipment, and you have to take care of all these complications, which also added to the cost of the ECMO service as well, which is not really sufficiently covered by the insurance reimbursement. So negotiation is really difficult, with the peer section. Why is that? ECMO centers, they cannot face powerful authorities like the insurance sectors, okay? So the best approach is to do this, right? So ECMO centers to affiliate with the health care officials and to sit with the insurance bodies to negotiate and sit down to modify and change all the policy that is existing. The critical care involves, high complexity decision making to assess any organ dysfunction. And for that purpose, okay, you have to manage this organ dysfunction and prevent life-threatening complications related to the organ failure. What is about the peer issues? What was once believed to be a rare salvage therapy is now growing up and more, okay, like ECMO. And this point is not really taken in their mind. So individual payers may determine when the ECMO is appropriate, not the physicians. And the second thing is that some payers may decide about the ECMO therapy is supported by literature and clinical evidence that it works or not, while we are the decision makers at bedside and we know this ECMO is gonna, is gonna be the best rescue for the patients. All right. Otherwise, they consider ECMO as experimental and the patient is not eligible for reimbursement. With insurance, with issuance of new CPTs as well, and we have now up to date around 25 CPTs, it is important for the payers to update their policies and new codes. And if the payer has no policies or updated CPTs, they have to sit down in a minute meeting with the payers to update the policies. This is one example of 15 CPTs were mentioned in the CHEST journal in 2015, and there is more than that. However, the CPT coding, depends on the age, the type of the ECMO, and the cannulation site. Beside that, you have to consider also the insertion of the ECMO cannulation, the initiation of the ECMO, repositioning of the cannulas, maintenance of the ECMO, and also the decannulation. In your daily notes, you have to mention about the indication of the ECMO, the circuit management parameters, anticoagulation, cannula position, and complications. Otherwise, you are not going to get the right reimbursement. Billing of critical care requires documentation of the vital organ failure and the urgent intervention. And just remember that you have also to mention that you spend around 30 minutes of your daily care for the ECMO patients to get the right reimbursement. Billing of the critical care procedures, just remember that critical care billing is totally different from the ECMO billing. So ECMO billing is separate from the critical care billing. If you don't have this, there should be an issue about your reimbursement. Well, the CMS established, payments via relative value units, which is taking in consideration of the physician work practice expense and also the malpractice expenses. So based on that, okay, you have to study very well how the ECMO reimbursement is going to be happening. And just I want to highlight about what is the missing piece, okay, in this SIO journal publication. So all the algorithm of multidisciplinary approach was there, but it was not mentioned about the financing directors or financing bodies to help to coordinate all the finances since the start of the program and to avoid any obstacles in the future. Billing, so you have to know that some CPT codings had been modified because now we are having prolonged ECMO runs, and it's not only including the adults but also including the neonates and the pediatrics. And now, for that reason, we have 25 new CPTs to consider the reimbursement. Cost of the ECMO practice, it's estimated between $20,000 US up to $400,000 to cover for enough reimbursement in the United States, which is, this is, just a retrospective study which was done and published by the Pharmacoeconomics. And most of the cost was contributed to the personnel in 40% of the cost, the disposables, medications, lab imaging, and blood products. So suggestions for that, which we work on, is we formed a committee between the Department of Health Administration, the ECMO physicians, and the insurance bodies to look for the full revision of the ECMO interventions and reimbursements. We're taking care of the ECMO to be considered as life-saving, but not routine mechanical ventilation and tracheostomy care. And also, we just want to replicate the international models for insurance coverage for ECMO and to revise all the CPT codings related to the patients admitted to the hospitals on ECMO. And we just developed this, all 40 interviews between all the stakeholders taking care of the patient care on ECMO, including stakeholders in the Department of Health, payer discussion, ECMO providers, and also we had virtual meetings with, to make benchmarking with 5 countries in the world to make, the best approach for financializing. And also we did, one very important step is to do an official audit by the Pricewaterhouse international company to look for the actual cost and also for what are the gaps of the current policy and what are the solutions. And you can see this is the result of their audit. And it's just the key opportunities to develop opportunities for patient care, patient retrieval cost, and should be well considered. The cost of the consumables and the supplies should be taken care of, and also the paradigm cost for transfer patients. Beside also the insurance coverage for, the basic insurance. We have different policies for insurance, basic, and one more is, in the middle, and we have a premium, policies. So to look for the basic one, because we have a lot of low resources or just limited income people who are working there, just want to make sure that this package is going to be covering for the ECMO in the future. Key solutions for this problem is revision of the insurance policy, meetings with the payer section, and also coming with new pricing for the new ECMO ecosystem, in addition to engagement with the ECMO centers and the insurance bodies. Also, engagement with financial auditors like Pricewaterhouse to make real evaluation for the finances and what are the gaps of the insurance coverage. And last is about adjusting the insurance packages for all people who are living in United Arab Emirates. Last is hoping for better insurance coverage in United Arab Emirates and worldwide. I'm sure that there are missing, insurance gaps in different countries which are faced by the insurance. And also, I would like just to ask for an initiative by the EuroELSO experts to look more on this burden and to look for a prominent financing statement which will be guiding for the insurance policy and the payers in the future. Until that time, I'm happy to share my experience with my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We go on. And I suppose it's my task now to introduce our last speaker because of his complex name. No, that's not the truth. It's because we know each other for a long time already. Karagiannidis from Cologne. He's the head of the ECMO department there. And Christian actually has done a lot of work for us in Germany concerning policy making. And it's your task now to explain to us how we can convince policymakers to use these expensive devices while we have not much experience. Thank you very much, Christian.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess I have 2 minutes left for this talk. I need a little bit more, but it's. I will start with my conflicts of interest, and I will come back to this later, and I tell you why. And I would like to give you an overview of what I learned during the last 3 years, and then I will give you the German perspective of this MDR update we have at the moment. There is something on the way, and I'm more optimistic that we overcome the problems we have at the moment. So first of all, as you see in my conflicts, I'm a member of 3 governmental commissions, and this is something which gives you a broader access to political decisions, and that is the key if you want to change something. So our actual ministry is also a medical doctor, and he appointed us in this expert commission. And I will tell you a little bit what I learned in the last 3 years. So first of all, politicians are politicians, usually. They are not experts in your field. That's sometimes it's a little bit boring for you that you have to explain the basics, but they are very good in their field, to do politics, And you are the one, you are the expert in your field, and you have to tell them what they should do. But you are not a politician. That is very important if you want to convince them. The second point is that you should write that down. And the best you can do is to do that short. And the best you can do is to gain trust from politics is that you do that really with a high quality. And we did this within these governmental commissions. These are 9 for the hospital reforms in Germany. It's currently under the way. It's a very difficult reform. But this is also for the EuroELSO, and I guess the EuroELSO together with the industry has some task within the next years that we have all the ECMO devices on the market. This is one key, that you have short proposals with a very high quality. One suggestion is that you should always write it as short and as concise as you can. Uli showed these documents from the European Union. No one is looking at these documents. And the more graphics you use, and this is, for example, part of this hospital reform, how we would like to restructure emergency medical systems in Germany, because then people understand that. And be aware that no one wants to read more than 2 pages anymore. If you look at a paper, you're looking at the figures, you're looking at the tables, and if you're honest, you're looking at the conclusion, except you're a reviewer. Then you look at the methods and all the rest. The only one who is looking and reading is ChatGPT and other large language models. And therefore, it's very important if you want to change something, and I guess we have to change something with this new device regulation, that you be very concise and very short. I asked this morning one of these large language model to give me the latest update on the MDR, and that's impressive. I guess it will change medicine, not only the large language models, AI in general will change the medicine with an enormous speed within the next years. But you see also for the classification of the devices what will happen within the next years. Some politicians like impact analysis. That is very important. And this is the southern part of Germany. The right is Bavaria here, Bavaria is difficult, at least in terms of hospital reform. Otherwise, it's very difficult, Thomas? No. But this is something they like very much. These are the hospitals in the southern part of Germany. And the green are the level 2 and 3 hospitals. In Germany, that means this is level 2 is what you know as 300 to 500 beds. Level 3 is university hospital or equivalent. And the other points are very, very small hospitals, 100 bed. And if you would remove them, and if you look how long someone has to drive to the next hospital, you see a huge difference. And politicians understand that, and they like this impact analysis. And that's also important for the MDR, because if you give them an impact analysis, what would happen if we don't have this ECMO device on the market, they understand it much better than all the documents Uli showed you before. Sometimes also transparency is helpful. So we are starting with that in Germany now. We will see how it ends. It was a huge discussion on this law, but it passed the parliament a few weeks ago. And now we will have a big transparency offensive in Germany. So everyone can look at your hospital. Everyone knows how many doctors are working there, how many nurses are working there. I guess we will get the baseline mortality for some of the diseases. That can also be very helpful for the future. And that can also be very helpful for the medical device regulation if you can show that your device is safe at the end. And therefore registry become also important in the future. This is something which is a little bit difficult topic, but I guess for the EuroELSO, it will be important for the future. Lobbyism is something, I created this Janus head with AI. So, and I'm not a big fan of lobbyism, but you need that, especially in the European Union. And I guess the medical societies like the EuroELSO, together with the industry, have to do some lobbyism, that we find politicians who support us, that they do not take everything from the market we need in daily clinical practice, especially for the orphan devices. So now I would like to give you an update, and this is in conjunction with the German ministry. I talked with them yesterday. And from the German perspective, we have three major points, and this is, I guess, quite important, and EuroELSO can work also on this. First of all, this, what Uli showed before, that we have such a huge problem with the MDR, that we have to bring all these devices for certification and so, that the time frame was by far too strict, was that Germany told the European Union that we have to stop that and that we have to prolong that. IVDR means in vitro diagnostics, and that was a fast-track request from Germany in November. And the core elements were first, the extension of the period, and Uli showed that before, and you can also ask ChatGPT. The second one is that it's more flexible. And the third one is also very important. So if a company now would like to withdraw a product from the market, let's say one of the ECMO devices, they have to go to the European Union. So that makes it easier for us that we know that one of these life-saving devices will disappear. That is the first point we had from our German perspective. The second one is that the European Union and the Commission recognized that bureaucracy is by far too high in Europe, and that it takes a lot of time and costs. And that is something they want to discuss after the next elections, and I guess we will see the new Commission at the end of the year. That is also very important for us. But the most important point is this one. And at the moment, it's not clear if this will come or not. With the support with some partners in the European Parliament, Germany is calling for a protection system for orphan devices. And this is very important because many of these devices we are using are orphan devices, at least to my mind. There is a definition from the US, which is very important. And the major problem is that if you have orphan devices, it's very hard to get some randomized clinical trials and so on. You know that from your daily clinical practice. And therefore, it's very important that we stress, and that's also a task for the EuroELSO, together with the medical companies, that we convince all the member states that we need a special regulation for orphan devices. Yeah? That is something EuroELSO should do because that protects the ECMO field. And Germany is, I guess, a little bit in the lead in this position, but we need the support of all other countries. So they are working on that, and the next step will also be artificial intelligence, also a very difficult topic. What will we do in the future with the data? But I guess it would be good if our society has a clear understanding what we want, yeah, and that we support that orphan devices get special regulation. So from today on, if someone asks you what an orphan device is, yeah, ECMO is the most seldom device you ever saw in your life, okay? Yeah, in Germany, only 1.4% of all patients on the ICU receive ECMO. That's nothing, well? If you look, there are only 50 hospitals with 100 beds providing ECMO in Germany. Yeah, that's nearly nothing, yeah, at the end. Yeah. We have only 400 hospitals out of 1,700 who provide ECMO. Only 10% of all patients on invasive mechanical ventilation get ECMO. So you have to sell it a little bit. Yeah, so that's very important, because otherwise we will not get access to this special regulation of orphan devices. And I guess you have to work in your country with the help of EuroELSO that we will still have in 5 or 10 years the devices on the market we have at the moment. What can we learn from other societies? That is also very important. That's, for example, the European Respiratory Society. They spend a lot of time, a lot of money in convincing the politicians in Brussels about some more strict regulation on air quality. So, you know, PM 2.5, PM 10 and so on. And they spend a lot of time there in Brussels, and they were successful a few weeks ago. The European Union agrees to future air pollution limits, and now you find that on the website. So although they spend a lot of time and a lot of money, they had success at the end, and that's very important, I guess, and that's something also for the EuroELSO we can copy. Yeah, so we should write down what we want, precise, short, the best with graphics, and then go to the politicians in Brussels and tell them why these ECMO devices are orphan devices and why they should stay on the market, and then we have to discuss which data they should show and which not. If you want to further read that, it's something like the timeline we have there. There are a lot of information on the website. That's too much for one person. But the last point, and that's my last slide, which is, I guess, for us very important, and that's from yesterday, that the European Union now recognized that there are different regulations in the world. You know that the FDA is less strict than a few years ago, but on the other hand, China is now more strict than in Europe, and China handles people from Europe different than the own people. That is something which the EU claims, and now they are discussing if there is really a fair access to the Chinese market. And that is also for our supplier and for our companies very important, because you have to be there on the market. They can be here, but it cannot be that China restricts it more to Chinese companies. And I guess this is something which is very interesting. We will see that within the next months, how it develops, but we should keep that in mind, that we also put some pressure on it, that our companies can go to the Chinese market as the Chinese can go to the European market. I guess it should be open, to my mind, but it cannot be that European companies are restricted in China, and it seems to be at the moment a little bit. So therefore, thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to take a seat with the other speakers, if they're still here. I think we have 3 or 4 minutes for questions, this collision with public policy, money, and what physicians want to do. And I'm hopeful that someone can come up with some other than myself.
While everybody's thinking of a question and while everybody's coming back on stage, I have a question with my perfusionist hat on, and it really, everybody can give his input, because it's really something that involves all of you, sustainability, economics, engineering. So talking about these orphan devices, I think it's a very nice name. We have a huge amount of companies producing them. We have a huge amount of companies making disposables. And these days, we see a huge amount of new ECMO centers, starting up an ECMO procedure and then transferring this patient to somewhere else, where they have different equipment, where we have to change over, putting new disposables, a new machine, because our nurses are not trained on the other machines, and also because the machine has to go back to the other hospital. So there are a lot of problems, not only sustainability, it's economics, it's engineering. I don't know if engineers could solve this, but what do you think about this? Because this is something that we should look into, I would think.
Thank you. If I understand your question right, it's more a question of usability and also of comparability of systems. I would make a little comment on tubing sets and all these things. There is something in MDR that says under MDR now, even the packager of tubing sets will be responsible for the approval. So we will see that you have to show that your tube with your connectors, with everything goes together. You have to approve that as a manufacturer. So you will probably see less tubing sets that are put together from companies because it makes a big burden for them to put them together in the future. So that's one point of the question. The other point when you say, there's also a question that was addressed this morning already also with standardization. And I can only urge also the manufacturers, I mentioned that also, that they should participate in the standardization because that brings then products on the market that are standardized, where, I don't know, the emergency button has the same color as from the other one. That is then again a question of usability, which is also a big point, because if you're in stress in the ICU and you have different systems and you press the wrong button, you can kill a person. And so this is something that's also very important. There are also ongoing activities regarding ISO standards for usability, and it's very important that really the manufacturers also get together there, do that jointly, and get a joint standard on these things so that you can work safer in your ICU.
Yeah, let me add something. In the Western world, we have a liberal access to the market, and it's good that we have that. Yeah, I'm very much on the side that every company can sell what they want as long that they have a certain standard, and it's good that we have better standards, that we call the pressures in the same way. On the other hand, if a healthcare system is paid by an insurance, yeah, we have to talk about which hospital should perform ECMO in the future. Yeah? We try to restrict that in Germany with our proposal, and we have 1,700 hospitals, 1,700. I showed you that 400 provide ECMO, yeah? 50 of them have 100 beds, yeah? So one surgeon, maybe 2 or 3 other doctors at the end, and they are providing ECMO. And we wanted to restrict that to the university hospitals and comparable hospitals. These are 165 in Germany, and the politicians didn't want to do that. Yeah? So everyone should do ECMO. And that is a key, because if you have different devices, you can handle that best if you are a big center, if you have a lot of people working there, and if they are familiar with the devices. And I guess we should work on this point, that we need some criteria, and maybe some European criteria. What is an ECMO center? Yeah? How many nurses do you have to have? How many doctors do you have to have? What about education? That is something, I guess, we are trying to do that now on the national level in Germany, but it would be also good for the EuroELSO to provide some statement at least, yeah, what is an ECMO center?
Yeah, along with your mentioned points, I totally agree about, the credentialing policies for operating ECMO centers. So in Abu Dhabi in particular, since we had established the ECMO task force, we worked through the quality committee to write, very detailed credentialing policy for ECMO centers, and also for ECMO practitioners. So the ECMO centers, there is an OK checklist for any hospital who wants to start the ECMO service. Once these are fulfilled, including all the requirements that you had mentioned about, the ECMO physicians, nurses, perfusionists, machines, the room capacity for the ECMO patients, etc., right? Beside that, we are also revalidating the ECMO centers every 2 years, because they can show up, the peak level of their preparedness to start the ECMO service, but later on maybe there are few resignations, few withdrawals, and there is a shortage of the manpower which cannot provide the best care for the ECMO patients. So it is already existing in our area. However, beside that, also for the ECMO practitioners, we are strictly demanding that ECMO basic course should be taken on an annual basis, otherwise your license is going to be suspended. And once we do the ECMO training courses, we are also having different ECMO machines just to make them on the same level of preparedness and response to any patient.
Last point, Peter.
Yeah, can I just make from a sustainability point of view, I would love for, let's say, a countrywide collaboration. So if you would have in one country have the same circuits, have the same machines, that would be awesome, like in the UK. And then you set up a national database to know when your consumables are about to expire. You can change them over between different centers. So collaboration is the key, and to be open about it so that we don't waste as much as we are doing at the moment.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think we've overrun a little. I can congratulate the speakers on their excellent talks. I just want you to leave with 3 thoughts. It's not clear to me, in the end, who's paying for all the treatment we want to give. And I think that seems to be a crucial question that we can only sidle up to. I think Peter's point that perhaps if we treated less people, it will be cheaper, but nobody particularly wants to move towards that with any speed. And the collision really between what we want to do as physicians and the regulators and the developers seems to me to be scary. But thank you very much for your excellent presentations, and I'd like the audience to congratulate them, and then we'll move on to coffee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.